Hey guys, Mason here. Welcome back to Char TV. How are you all doing? Tonight, I've got something special for you. 5 terrifying vacation stories that went horribly wrong. A vacation should be an escape, sun, adventure, a break from the ordinary. But for these people, the moment they arrived, something was wrong. The air felt heavy. The locals avoided their eyes, and then the real horror began. Maybe you felt it before, that uneasy silence in a hotel room, the feeling of being watched in an unfamiliar place, a door that should have stayed locked, but didn't. Before we begin, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and if you haven't already, subscribe to Char TV, hit that like button and turn on notifications, especially if you love chilling horror stories that stay with you long after they're over. Now, let's begin. I was 36 in summer 2008, a mechanic from Leeds, when me and Emma finally got out of England for a proper holiday. Emma's a nurse, 34, and we'd been slogging away forever. Greasy garages for me, night shifts for her. So we scraped our savings for a week on Carriacou, this little speck in the Caribbean, part of Grenada. Sounded like paradise, quiet, rural, beaches and palm trees, not swarming with tourists. We flew from Gatwick, landed in Grenada, took a ferry that rocked like a bastard, and stepped off in Hillsborough. Sun blazing, air thick with salt, kids chasing each other with fishing nets. The place was gorgeous, hills covered in green, water so clear you could see the bottom, houses painted all bright and chipped. We'd rented this cottage near the beach, cheap because it was off-season, and the old bloke giving us the keys, gap in his teeth, skin like leather, gave us a funny look, said, "Keep salt by the door, eh?" I grinned, for he was taking the piss, and we hauled our bags down this dusty track, flip-flops smacking, ready for sun and cheap beer. The cottage was this rickety wooden shack on stilts, blue paint peeling off, porch with a hammock, windows just shutters, no glass. Inside, it smelled like sea and damp wood. Floor creaked under my boots, little kitchen with a rusty stove, bed with a net over it. We loved it, dumped our gear, cracked open some Carib beers, sat out front listening to the waves roll in. That first night was spot on, stars everywhere, warm breeze, crickets loud as hell. Emma fell asleep in the hammock. I crashed on the bed, thinking this was it, our big break from the grey. Then I woke up to this racket, wind chimes on the porch going nuts, clanging like someone was shaking them. I stumbled out half asleep and the air was dead. No breeze, nothing moving. Felt like eyes on me, but I shook it off, locked the door, told Emma it was probably some island trick when she mumbled about it. Next day, we hit the beach and sand white as sugar, water warm, coconuts just lying around. I was buzzing. Carriacou felt alive, simple, like Leeds was a million miles away. We swam, ate fish some guy cooked on a grill, drank rum till the sun went down. That night, though, the chimes started again. No wind, just ringing. Then this smell hit. Burnt, like old clothes on a fire, coming from the trees out back. I grabbed my torch, checked it out. Nothing, just dark and leaves. Emma said she heard a hum, like a woman singing, low and weird, drifting on the air. I said it was probably some local up late, but my gut didn't buy it. We locked up, tried to sleep, but that hum stuck in my head, faint and eerie. By the 3rd day, I was on edge. The humming came during daylight. Quiet, creepy, like it was following us around the cottage. The chimes kept going off even when we took them down and chucked them inside. They'd ring on the table, no one touching them. One time, I found this scorch mark on the porch. Black, smeary, like something hot dragged across it. I showed Emma and she got quiet, said it smelled burnt again. That night, I woke up to footsteps. Soft, barefoot, padding outside. I looked out the shutter and my stomach dropped. There was this figure by the shore, just standing there, dark against the moon, too tall, too thin, head bent funny. I blinked and it was gone. Emma woke up, asked what was wrong, and I said it was nothing, a drunk local maybe, but my hands were shaking when I locked the shutters tight. It got worse from there. The humming turned into a voice, old, raspy, saying our names, Tom, Emma, over and over, like it was testing them. I'd find scorch marks inside, on the walls, the floor, stinking like ash and rot. One day I opened the kitchen cupboard and this wave of heat hit me. Burnt smell so bad I gagged. but nothing was there. The footsteps came every night now, circling the house, and I'd hear that voice through the walls, closer each time. Emma saw it first. She screamed one night, pointed at the doorway. I turned, and there she was. This old woman, hunched, skin loose like it didn't fit, hair wet and stringy over her face. She moved wrong, jerky, like her joints were broken, arms twitching too fast. Her eyes glowed, little red dots under the hair, and she hummed our names, loud, splitting the air. I yelled at her to get out, threw a bottle, but she was gone when it hit the wall. We stayed up all night, lights on, telling ourselves it was a squatter, a trick, anything but what it felt like. The 5th night was when it tried to end us. We'd barely slept. Emma was a mess. I was pissed and scared, but we couldn't leave, stuck with no ferry till morning. I was in the kitchen, boiling water to stay awake, when this bang hit, like the roof caved in. I grabbed a knife, ran to the bedroom, and found Emma on the floor, crying, pointing at the corner. The room was trashed, bed flipped, net ripped, shutters smashed open. That smell, ash, rot, wet cloth, choked the air, and then I saw her. She was taller now, filling the doorway, this old hag in a ragged dress, dripping water like she crawled out the sea. Her skin was tight, leathery, stretched over bones that bent too much, arms too long, fingers curled like claws. Her head jerked up, hair falling back, and her face, Christ, her face, was human but messed up, eyes huge and red, mouth wide, teeth sharp and black, grinning at us. She moved, fast, scuttling like a bug, legs twisting, and that voice came out, deep, Tom, Emma, loud enough to rattle my skull. I shoved Emma behind me, swung the knife, but she was on us, claws grabbing my shirt, breath hot and stinking, eyes burning into me. I felt her in my head, cold, mad, like she was clawing inside, wanting us dead. Emma screamed, tripped back, and I heard her fumbling, sobbing. The thing pinned me to the wall, mouth opening wider, teeth an inch from my face, and I thought that was it. Then Emma yelled, "Get off him," and held up this little cross necklace, one her gran gave her years back. She wasn't big on God, neither of us were, but she was bawling, voice cracking, "Please, Christ, help us, I'm begging you." The thing froze, shrieked, this high, awful sound like glass breaking, clawed at its face and started smoking, black stuff pouring out. It staggered, shrank, burned away, leaving scorch marks and a pile of ash on the floor. I fell, gasping, Emma still holding the cross, both of us shaking like wrecks. We didn't sleep, grabbed our bags, sat on the beach till dawn, watching the house like it might come after us. Ferry came at first light and we got the hell off Carriacou, back to Granada, then home. In Hillsborough, before we left, this old woman at the dock saw us, white as sheets, bags under our eyes, and muttered something, crossed herself. I stopped her, asked what it was, and she looked scared, said, "Soucouillon." Old Mary from the hills, lost her kids to some sailors, cursed them, made a deal with something bad. Sheds her skin, hunts at night. Salt keeps her out, prayer sends her back. I told her about the cottage, and she nodded, said everyone knows that place, cheap for a reason. We tracked down the landlord in Grenada, this shifty guy in a bar, and he admitted it, knew she was there, thought she'd stay quiet, said sorry like it meant anything. Then he leaned in, voice low, said, "She's still out there, mate, waiting for the next ones." I walked away, his words stuck in me, cold, knowing we'd dodged something evil and scared it wasn't done. When I was 12, my family took a road trip down to Florida for a week-long vacation. We'd never done anything like that before, and I remember being beyond excited, mainly because I'd never stayed in a hotel before. To me, a kid from a small town, hotels seemed glamorous and adventurous. But after what happened that week, I've never looked at them the same way again. The first night in the hotel seemed normal enough. It wasn't fancy, just your average place off the highway. 2 queen-size beds, a small TV, and windows that overlooked a dimly lit parking lot. My parents slept in one bed, and my younger brother and I shared the other. I woke up sometime after midnight, thirsty. The room was dark except for a thin beam of yellowish hallway light slipping under the door. I got up quietly and headed towards the small sink just outside the bathroom. As I drank, I thought I heard faint scratching sounds coming from somewhere nearby. I froze, listening carefully. The sound was rhythmic, like fingernails gently scratching against wallpaper. Thinking it might be coming from another room, I tiptoed closer to the wall behind the TV cabinet, pressing my ear against it. The scratching was definitely louder here, slow and steady, almost careful. Suddenly it stopped. Just as I stepped away, a soft, muffled thud echoed from behind the wall, causing me to jump back, startled. I woke my dad, telling him I thought someone was stuck or something behind the wall. Groggy, he listened briefly, then dismissed it, reassuring me it was just pipes or perhaps another guest in an adjacent room. But when I returned to bed, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something wasn't right. The following night, I woke up again around the same time, feeling uneasy. This time, my heart began racing immediately because the scratching was unmistakably coming from our room. It was soft but continuous. I squinted into the darkness, and my eyes slowly adjusted enough to make out the shadowy corners. Across from my bed, near the foot of my parents' bed, I saw something that made my blood turn cold. A tall, thin figure stood perfectly still, facing the corner. I couldn't make out any features clearly, just a dark outline, impossibly still, as if waiting. My breath caught sharply in my throat, and I squeezed my eyes shut, trying desperately to convince myself I was dreaming. But when I opened them, the figure was still there, unmoved. I whispered urgently for my parents, but no one stirred. Then, as if sensing my fear, the figure moved. It didn't walk. It glided silently across the floor toward the door. I held my breath, my body paralyzed, as it disappeared through the doorway into the bathroom area, vanishing from my view. Terrified, I woke my dad again, nearly shouting this time. He checked the room thoroughly, looking behind the curtains, under beds, even in the bathroom. Nothing. Frustrated but trying to be comforting, he suggested it was a vivid nightmare, but I knew better. I hadn't dreamt it. We left the hotel a few days later, but the unease lingered. Years later, when I brought up the incident at a family gathering, my parents exchanged strange glances. Finally, my mother admitted she had felt something off too, that she'd woken one night to see the bathroom door slowly swing shut, even though everyone else was in bed. She'd dismissed it then, assuming it was her imagination playing tricks. I've often wondered about that room since. Was it haunted? Was someone secretly living in the walls, spying, coming out at night? Or was it something else entirely? Something I might never understand? All I know is, whatever it was, it changed the way I feel about hotels. And to this day, whenever I stay somewhere unfamiliar, I always double-check the corners before closing my eyes. Last summer, my friends and I finally made our dream trip to China. We'd saved up for years, watching travel vlogs, reading blogs, and practicing basic Mandarin so we wouldn't be completely lost once we arrived. Our itinerary was packed: start in Beijing, explore Shanghai, then venture to smaller towns for a taste of rural life. We didn't plan on anything supernatural, but that's exactly what we got. We spent our first few days in Beijing doing typical tourist stuff, visiting the Forbidden City and the Great Wall. The crowds were intense, but the energy was amazing. After that, we took a train to a smaller city called Linhai. A local guide named Yao, whom one of my friends had connected with online, met us at the station. He offered to show us around his hometown, including a nearby village with ancient folklore. It was a 2-hour drive from Linhai to the village, which sat at the foot of lush, fog-covered mountains. The moment we arrived, I felt something different in the air. An underlying tension, like the entire place was holding its breath. The locals were friendly, yet cautious. They seemed happy to see us, but also a bit hesitant. That evening, Yao invited us to have dinner at his grandmother's house. He explained that this region had a long history of ghost stories, including one particularly disturbing tale about a vengeful spirit known as the Nu Gui, a female ghost believed to appear when someone died under tragic or unjust circumstances. According to legend, she wore a red qipao, a traditional Chinese dress, her hair disheveled, her face twisted in sorrow and rage. We thought it was fascinating, chilling, sure, but just another ghost story, right? Something local parents told their kids to keep them in line. Yet, as Yao went on, the room grew silent. Even his grandmother, who'd been bustling around the kitchen, stopped what she was doing and gave him a stern look, as if warning him not to say too much. That night, we checked into a modest guest house near the edge of the village. It was old, with creaking floors and narrow hallways. Our room had 2 bunk beds. I took a top bunk by the window. The night breeze rustled the nearby trees, and I felt a strange, uneasy shiver. Around 2 a.m., I woke up thirsty. Carefully climbing down from the bunk, I nearly tripped over one of my friends sleeping on the floor. He insisted it was cooler down there. I went to the window to see if there was a small fridge or water station. That's when I noticed movement outside, something pale moving between the trees. At first, I thought it was an animal, but then I realized it was human-shaped, a woman, drifting through the trees in slow, deliberate steps. She wore something red, at least it looked red in the moonlight. I stared, transfixed. Her head was tilted at an odd angle, and her long hair obscured most of her face. For a split second, she seemed to meet my gaze. Even from that distance, my blood ran cold. I froze, unable to decide if I should wake the others or not. Then, without warning, the figure vanished. It didn't dart away, it just sort of disappeared behind a tree, and I didn't see it re-emerge. I tried to convince myself my eyes were playing tricks on me. I climbed back into bed and forced myself to sleep. The next day, Yao took us hiking in the mountains. On the trail, I pulled him aside, told him I saw someone wandering outside late at night. He got quiet. Then he told me that many villagers believe the Nugui appears to travelers who intrude on her territory or disturb her grave, though no one knows where she's actually buried. According to the story, she wanders the forest at night, looking for people who remind her of those who wronged her in life. Later that evening, one of my friends, Brandon, confided that he hadn't slept well. He said he had a nightmare about a woman in red standing by his bed, her hair covering her face, whispering something he couldn't understand. When he woke, the window was wide open, even though we'd locked it before going to sleep. That night was the worst. We all went to bed early, exhausted from hiking and from the creeping dread that had settled over us. Sometime after midnight, I awoke to the distinct sound of sobbing, a woman's soft, anguished cries drifting through the thin walls. At first, I thought it might be a guest in another room, but then my friend Craig, in the bunk below me, whispered, "You hear that too?" I nodded, crawling down to see if the hall light was on. It was pitch black out there, but the sobs were louder outside our room. Against my better judgment, I opened the door a crack. The hallway was empty. Still, the crying seemed to echo, like it was coming from everywhere at once. My heart was pounding so loudly, I could barely hear anything else. Then, silence. The sobbing stopped abruptly, replaced by the creaking floorboards at the far end of the hallway. I strained my eyes and saw her, the same figure in red, her face half hidden by long, tangled hair, leaning forward as if in pain. She suddenly jerked her head up and locked eyes with me, bloodshot eyes that gleamed with malice. I struggled to breathe. I slammed the door, stumbling backward. All my friends were awake by now, their faces pale. We barricaded the door with a chair and stood there, hearts racing, until morning light broke through the window. None of us dared to open that door until sunrise. At first light, we packed up and left as quietly as possible. Yao didn't push for an explanation, one look at us, and he knew we'd encountered something we couldn't explain. As we drove out of that village, the feeling of oppressive dread lifted, but a lingering fear stayed with me for a long time. Even now, I can't fully rationalize what we saw. Maybe there was a real woman in distress, or maybe it was just our imaginations fueled by a spooky story. But when I think about those bloodshot eyes in that dark hallway, I find it impossible to believe it was all in my head. I still love traveling, and I'm glad I experienced China's rich culture and history, but a part of me will always wonder if there truly was a Nugui roaming that village, seeking revenge in the dead of night. I can't say I believe in ghosts outright, but after that trip, I can't say I don't either. I had been scrolling through Airbnb for weeks, trying to find the perfect spot for a weekend getaway. Work had been grinding me down, and I needed a break, somewhere quiet, somewhere remote. I stumbled across this listing, a quaint little cabin nestled deep in the woods of upstate New York. The photos showed a cozy interior, wooden walls, a stone fireplace, a big bay window overlooking a sea of pine trees. The price was suspiciously low, but the reviews glowed. 5 stars across the board. "A hidden gem," one said. "Peaceful beyond words," said another. The host's name was listed as Eleanor, and her profile picture was just a blurry silhouette of a woman in a wide-brimmed hat. I thought little of it, Some people like their privacy. I booked it, packed my bags, and hit the road. The drive up took about 4 hours from the city. The GPS led me off the highway onto a winding back road that cut through the forest. The trees stood tall and dense, their branches knitting together overhead, blocking out most of the sunlight. By the time I reached the gravel path leading to the cabin, late afternoon had faded, and the sky bruised into dusk. The cabin looked exactly like the pictures, small, rustic, isolated, no neighbors for miles, just the kind of quiet I had craved. I parked, grabbed my duffel bag, and stepped out into the crisp air. That's when I noticed it. The silence. No birds sang, no wind rustled the leaves, nothing. It felt like the forest held its breath. I found the key under the mat, just as Eleanor's message had instructed, and let myself in. The place smelled faintly of damp wood and lavender, but it was clean and welcoming. A handwritten note sat on the kitchen counter. "Welcome. Make yourself at home. I'll stop by later to say hello. Your host, Eleanor." Her handwriting looked thin and spidery, like she'd scratched it out with an old fountain pen. I shrugged it off. Hosts checked in sometimes, didn't they? I unpacked, cracked open a beer, and settled onto the couch by the fireplace. For a while, everything felt perfect. Then, around 8 p.m., I heard a knock. It came soft, almost hesitant from the front door. I stood, expecting Eleanor, and opened it. A woman stood there, maybe in her 60s, wearing a long grey coat and that same wide-brimmed hat from her profile. She was thin, too thin really, with pale skin that looked almost translucent in the porch light. Her eyes, watery and grey, locked onto mine with an intensity that twisted my stomach. "You must be my guest," she said, her voice low and raspy, like she hadn't spoken in days. I nodded, forced a smile, and introduced myself. She didn't offer her hand, just stood there, staring. "I live nearby," she said. "If you need anything, just call out." She gave me no number, no further explanation. Before I could ask, she turned and shuffled off into the darkness, vanishing between the trees. I closed the door, locked it, and told myself she was just eccentric. Old people could be weird. That night, I lay in bed, scrolling on my phone, when I heard something, a faint tapping, like fingernails on glass. It came from the bay window in the living room. I sat up, listening. Tap, tap, tap. It sounded rhythmic, deliberate. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept out to check. The window stood empty, just the black wall of trees beyond the glass. I shone the light outside, expecting to spot a branch or maybe an animal, but I saw nothing. The tapping stopped the second I got close. I chalked it up to the house settling or the wind, though no breeze blew that night. Still, it took me a while to fall asleep. The next morning, I woke to find the front door ajar. Not wide open, just cracked, like someone had turned the knob and hadn't pushed it all the way. I knew I'd locked it. I'd checked it twice after Eleanor left. My heart pounded as I walked over to close it. That's when I noticed something else. The note from Eleanor had vanished. I searched the counter, the trash, everywhere. It was nowhere. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had knocked it off in the night and didn't notice. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The day passed uneventfully. I hiked a little, read by the fire, tried to shake off the unease. But as evening rolled around, things grew stranger. I cooked dinner, nothing fancy, just some pasta, when I heard footsteps upstairs. Heavy, slow steps creaked the floorboards directly above the kitchen. I froze, the spoon halfway to my mouth. The cabin was small, just one story, with a tiny attic crawl space I hadn't bothered to check. No one could have been up there. I set the spoon down, grabbed a knife from the block, just in case, and called out, "Hello?" The footsteps stopped. Silence fell. I stood there straining to hear, but it stayed quiet. Against my better judgment, I climbed the narrow ladder to the attic hatch. It remained locked from the outside with a rusty padlock. No one could have gotten in. I told myself it was an old house. Old houses made noises, but I didn't believe it. That night, I brushed my teeth when I caught something in the bathroom mirror. A shadow, just for a split second, moved behind me in the hallway. I whipped around, but the hall stood empty. My pulse raced. I checked every room, every closet. Nothing. I was alone. I locked the bedroom door, shoved a chair under the knob, and tried to sleep. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of whispering. It sounded faint, muffled, like it came through the walls. I couldn't make out words, just a low, overlapping murmur, like 2 or 3 voices talking at once. I sat up, held my breath, tried to pinpoint it. It came from the living room. I didn't want to look, but I had to know. I grabbed my phone, eased the chair away from the door, and stepped out. The whispering stopped the moment I crossed the threshold. The room lay dark, the fire long dead. I flicked on the light, and that's when I saw it. A single muddy footprint on the rug. It looked small, like a woman's, pointing toward the bay window. I hadn't tracked that in. I had been barefoot inside all day. My throat tightened. I checked the front door, still locked. The windows, latched. No one could have gotten in, but that footprint sat there, fresh and wet, the mud glistening under the light. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the couch, knife in hand, watched the window until dawn. Around 6 a.m., I heard a car crunching up the gravel path. I peeked through the blinds and saw Eleanor stepping out of an old sedan, that grey coat flapping around her bony frame. She didn't knock this time, just stood there, stared at the cabin, her head tilted slightly like she listened. Then she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It stretched too wide, too knowing. She got back in her car and drove off without a word. I packed my stuff and left right then, hours before checkout. On the drive home, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see her car behind me. I didn't. When I got back to the city, I checked the Airbnb listing to leave a review, or maybe report her, but it had vanished. The whole listing, wiped from the site like it never existed. I searched Eleanor's name, the address, anything. Nothing came up. It felt like the cabin didn't exist. A week later, I still felt jumpy, still heard that tapping in my dreams. Then I got an email from Airbnb, a generic survey about my stay. Attached was a photo, automatically uploaded from the host's account. It showed me standing in the cabin's living room, staring at the bay window. The picture had been taken from outside through the glass, at night. I stood alone in the frame, but in the reflection of the window, a figure loomed behind me. Thin, pale, wearing a wide-brimmed hat. I never told anyone about that trip, but sometimes, late at night, I swore I heard that whispering again, just beyond the walls. It was supposed to be a dream vacation. My friend Daniel and I had planned this trip to Spain for over a year. 2 weeks of sun, sightseeing, and late nights in Barcelona. We had saved up, mapped out every stop, and even booked a stay in an old boutique hotel near the Gothic Quarter, known for its beautiful architecture and deep history. If I had known what would happen, I never would have set foot in that place. The hotel was tucked away on a narrow side street, its stone facade covered in ivy. It looked charming, but there was something unsettling about it that I couldn't put my finger on. The receptionist was an older woman who barely spoke English, but she handed us our key with a polite nod. Room 306. We hauled our bags upstairs, passing dimly lit hallways lined with antique paintings, portraits of unsmiling men and women, their eyes following us as we walked. The room itself was small but nice enough. A wrought iron bed, a wooden wardrobe, a tiny balcony overlooking the alley below. The moment I stepped inside, I felt an odd pressure in my chest, like the air was heavier. Daniel didn't seem to notice. He just tossed his bag on the bed and flopped down, sighing in relief. "Man, this place has character," he said. That night we hit the bars, wandering the lively streets until well past midnight. When we finally stumbled back to the hotel, exhaustion hit me hard. I collapsed into bed without even changing clothes. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night. It was dead silent. The street noise, the occasional laughter from passers-by, gone. The air felt thick, suffocating. I turned my head slightly and froze. The wardrobe door was open. Just a crack, but open. I was sure we'd closed it before going to bed. I squinted, my pulse quickening, trying to see if it was just a trick of the darkness. Then, ever so slowly, the door creaked. I sat up, heart hammering. "Daniel," I whispered, nudging his arm. He groaned in his sleep but didn't wake. The wardrobe door stood completely still now. I told myself it was just settling. That old wood shifts, expands, contracts. I forced myself to lie back down, my back to the wardrobe. I shut my eyes and willed myself to sleep. Then I heard it, breathing. Shallow, raspy breathing coming from inside the wardrobe. I couldn't move. My mind screamed at me to run, to turn on the light, to do something, but my body wouldn't obey. The breathing was slow, deliberate, like someone was trying to remain quiet. Then, scraping, fingernails dragging against wood. My paralysis broke. I lunged for the bedside lamp, fumbling with the switch. Light flooded the room. The breathing stopped. The scraping stopped. The wardrobe door hung slightly open, revealing only darkness inside. My chest heaved as I forced myself to stand, to step forward. I reached out with a trembling hand and yanked the door fully open. Nothing. The wardrobe was empty. I exhaled sharply, feeling stupid. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the drinks had messed with my head. I shut the wardrobe firmly and even wedged a chair against it for good measure. Then I crawled back into bed, telling myself it was just my imagination. But the next morning, as we packed up to head out for the day, Daniel frowned at me. "Dude, did you open the balcony door last night?" I turned to look. The glass doors leading to the tiny balcony were slightly ajar. "No," I said, my stomach knotting. "I locked it." Daniel shrugged, brushing it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. That night, I made sure to lock everything. Wardrobe, balcony, even the bathroom door. I kept the lamp on, just in case. At some point in the early hours, I woke up again. This time, it wasn't the wardrobe. Daniel was sitting up in bed, his back straight, his head tilted slightly downward. I blinked, confused. "Daniel?" I whispered, no response. Then slowly he turned his head toward me, but not like a normal movement. His neck twisted at an unnatural angle, his chin almost touching his shoulder, his face partially obscured by shadows. My blood ran cold. "Daniel?" I tried again, my voice low. He didn't answer. He didn't move, just sat there, breathing in that slow, rasping way. The same breathing I had heard from inside the wardrobe the night before. I grabbed my phone, flipping on the flashlight. The moment the beam of light hit his face, he gasped, like someone waking up from a nightmare, and looked around in confusion. "What the hell?" he mumbled, rubbing his temples. "Why am I sitting up?" I didn't answer. I just told him we were checking out first thing in the morning. We left as soon as the sun came up. The receptionist barely reacted when I handed over the key, but as we turned to leave, she muttered something in Spanish under her breath. I didn't catch it, but when I got home, I asked a Spanish-speaking friend what it meant. She had said, "It follows the ones who listen." I still don't know what happened in that room. I don't know what Daniel saw in his dreams that night, or what made him sit up like that, breathing like something else was inside him. But I do know one thing. I don't think whatever was in that hotel room stayed there. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I swear I still hear it breathing. And that brings us to the end of tonight's stories. If you enjoyed these eerie tales, make sure to subscribe to Char TV, hit that like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss another chilling upload. It helps more than you know, and I'd love to have you along for the next one. Now before you go, you might have noticed I used vacation instead of holiday. Normally I'd say holiday, but for the sake of consistency, vacation just fits better here. Either way, I don't think any of these trips turned out to be much of a break, do you? What started as a getaway became something far worse, something they'll never forget. So wherever you go next, whether it's a road trip, a beachside escape, or even just a quiet weekend away, pay attention. Listen to the sounds in the night, trust your instincts, and maybe leave the door locked. Sleep well, if you can.